told you I would be back to do a proper review of Paul McCartney's McCartney 3 Imagined, which it is pronounced 3 Imagined. I didn't understand the wordplay on first glance. When I was taking the notes for this, all of a sudden, 3 Imagined, like reimagined. Oh, okay. I am a little slow on the uptake, but I got it. So, I will be honest with you. This album is different from what I thought it was going to be going into it. From my understanding going into it, I thought this was an album of cover versions of songs from McCartney 3. And there are 3 on here, but most of it is not that. No. Basically, they should have promoted it more as like an album of remixes, basically. Pretty much every single track on here was literally reimagined. Imagine such a thing. But they're approached totally differently, done in different stylings, and it's really interesting to compare and contrast. Some of them seem like maybe this was like more of along the lines of Paul's original vision for it, but couldn't quite accomplish it during lockdown when it was just he and himself in the studio. I don't know, but I mean, it's definitely interesting to compare the two, because I'm like, alright, you know, some of these I actually like more than the original. I can't believe I'm saying that. Especially for something that, because I assumed it was just going to be nothing but covers, I was like, oh, so why are we doing that? Like, but now that I see what it is, I'm like, oh, actually this is really cool. I liked this a lot more than I expected to. Like, straight up, gonna be real with you. Because having assumed it was gonna be an album of covers, I figured it'll be okay, but probably won't be something with a lot of replayability. Well, A, I was wrong. B, I believe it already made it onto the Billboard charts, and I think it hit #1. It was the first remix album to hit #1 on the Billboard charts. And I forget how many years. I was like, damn, go Paul, look at him smashing records. So, I do have my notes on my laptop in front of me, so if you see me looking down, yes, I am reading them off the screen in front of me. So, anywho, got the album over here. So, the first track on here is Find My Way featuring Beck. Oh yeah, that was the other thing. I thought it was going to be like a 1-to-1 with all the songs. No, they even like mixed up the order of the track listing. Almost like you threw all of them as slips of paper into a hat and just reached it random, and whatever order they came out in, that's the order they're going to go on this album. It's kind of cool. But yeah, so it opens with what I can only refer to as the Find My Way Club remix, because that is totally what it sounds like, and it's really cool for it, I think. So, it's really trippy, and, like, especially pairing with the video, which I'm gonna do another video on, so don't you guys worry. I don't need to go into it here, because it's gonna be its own separate thing, reacting to that. I meant to have this done a lot sooner than I did, so I could get that up sooner. Before I knew when this was arriving, I thought this was going to go up the day that this showed up, but neither here nor there. So that's okay, it just gives me more time to spread out my content. But anyway, so it's really trippy, so you pair it with the video, which, like, it's got a really psychedelic vibe to it, which, I mean, given it's Paul, that totally works. And yet it still feels modernized, which is a really interesting combination. The one thing that I think it would have been really interesting to see would be if they did, like, whatever studio wizardry they did on When Winter Comes to basically age down his voice and make him sound younger so that the vocals would match the video a little closer, but they probably didn't know what the video was gonna look like when they were remixing this, so again, I don't hold it against it. I just think it would be really interesting to see what that would look like paired together like that. But regardless, I actually really like the track a lot, and this version has grown on me more and more the more times that I've listened to it. So the second track on here is Dominic Fike's cover of The Kiss of Venus, which I'm probably in the minority here. I think I prefer this version. Don't hate me! Don't come for me, Paul fans! Don't hate me! Like, straight up, like, the first line or two vocally, it was a hard sell. I was just like, oh. But then as it goes on, I'm like, oh, okay. Actually, this is really, that's really good. I've never even heard of this dude before. Like, where has he been hiding? Like, oh my god, he is a hell of a singer. I really like what they did with it. So, the next one on here is Pretty Boys, which is, I still don't know how to say the name of this artist, but it's featuring Kruangbin? I still don't know if that's right. But, this one gives me serious vibes of David Bowie's Fashion. I don't know if it's just because of the topic of the song, because it doesn't really feel like it in the terms of sounding like it, but it gives the same vibe, if that makes any sense. I will say it feels like it goes on a little too long, but I do, at the same time, in the same vein as that, I do prefer this version over the original. But at least it's Paul's vocals here, and it's not a cover, but yeah, it's just trippy seeing which ones I like better on the original, which ones I like better here. It's all still Paul, so it's all good. So that brings us to what on the vinyl version is the first track on side B. So this is Women and Wives, the St. Vincent remix. And while I love the original of this one too, I'd put this one on about equal footing in terms of how much I like both versions. So it's kind of a tie for me with these two. I like them for different reasons. I feel like this one is the more souped up version and better encapsulates like the vibe and the vision of what Paul probably had in mind going into this one. So it feels a little truer to the track itself, even though it's not the original one. So then that brings us to Deep Down, the Blood Orange remix. So this one's kind of like an R&B boy band remix of the song with harmonies added onto it, but I really like it. Like, really, really like it. Even with the auto-tuning on Paul's voice, which those of you who've been on this channel for a long time know how I typically feel about auto-tune, but this is one of the rare exceptions where I actually don't mind it. Because usually auto-tune annoys the crap out of me, and I can't stand it. But it's done well enough here to where I'm like, okay, actually it kind of works on this. It's a very fine line to walk when it comes with auto-tune and me, but no, I think this one was done well. I think it actually adds kind of an interesting layer to it that it wouldn't have otherwise. I can't decide which version I like more, this one or the original. I think it's another one where they're about equal for me. But the one thing I dislike with this track is that really high-pitched note that almost sounds like a flat line at the start of it, which, to be fair, is also in the original, but it's not as dragged out as it is in this one. I think it only bugs me because it's like that exact pitch your ears make if they start ringing, and it's like just enough to make me feel a little bit disoriented. Like, does anyone else get that from a just a me thing? I don't know. I'm like, if it didn't have that on there, it'd be a perfect track. But, again, just a me thing, but yeah, that. But I otherwise think it's a really, really cool version of this, having those harmonies added to it. So then we come to the second cover on the album, and this one, I had to see if it was on side C or not. No, we're still on side B. Is Seize the Day by Phoebe Bridgers. Well, not by, but featuring Phoebe Bridgers doing the cover of it. So I think this one could easily stand on its own, to where like nobody would even know it is a Paul McCartney song or even recognize that it was something that he wrote had they not heard the McCartney 3 album first. Like, it stands that solidly in her version of it. I'm like, wow, that is a tall bar to reach. But she totally did it expertly, and I freaking love it. That takes nothing away from Paul's version. I adore his, too. It's another one where I think I like them equally as each other. but it's just like, it stands so well where it sounds modern in its own right in her version. I don't know, it's hard to put into words how I feel about this one, but it's really, really well done, and I am crazy picky when it comes to covers of my faves, so well done to you. Just saying. So that brings us to side C on the vinyls. So this is Slidin', the EOB remix, and this track was already the hard rocker of the album even on the original one, but this version took it a step further and made it rock even harder and grittier and grungier, and I love this one. Honestly, it feels like the vibe of this one feels like it would have fit in with the new album. Not to say the McCartney 3 album, but I mean the album entitled New. We always have this confusion whenever talking about that album. I think he knew it when he named that. He knew he'd be forever trolling us with it. But anyway, yeah, it feels like that same vibe as I get from that album. This totally would have fit in with those tracks. So, I really like that album too. So, totally love this. So that brings us to Long-Tailed Winterbird, the Damon Albarn remix. And this remix actually gives the track more of like a reggae vibe than anything. Like, not 100%, but it's the most similar thing I think I can compare it to. That makes sense. But that said, I definitely prefer the original version of this one better. This one's just okay. It's not bad, but I mean, I'm just admittedly not as super into this one. So then we have the third and last cover of the album, and that's Lavatory Lil with Josh Homme, or Homme. I don't know if I'm saying that right either, and I feel really bad. So this is the third cover on the album. While the track is admittedly one of my favorites on the original album, and while I do enjoy this version too, I feel like it kind of loses something in the translation when it's not sung by Paul. Although he has not confirmed who those lyrics are about, I think we all have a pretty good idea, and I will leave it at that. We do not need to discuss that person. And just say, so hearing somebody else sing those lyrics that are so pointedly at that person, coming from somebody that's not Paul, it kind of loses something. But that aside, it's still a pretty solid cover. It's still good, but I mean, yeah, I definitely like the original better on that one, so. So that brings us to When Winter Comes, the Anderson.PAAK remix. Is it .pack or the spell? I don't know. Anyway, so this one is hands down my favorite track on this album. So even on the original album, it caught my attention immediately for how much younger Paul's voice sounded. So I wasn't sure if it was studio wizardry or what. So I went and did a little Google sleuthing, and turns out he originally recorded that during the Flaming Pie sessions. So, it all makes sense now why I love that one so much, since that was kind of like my entryway to the solo McCartney works was the Flaming Pie album, because I bought that release day when it came out. I'm aging myself, I know, but yeah, anything from that era is super near and dear to my heart, so it makes sense that I even, without knowing, gravitated towards that one. But this version, it's like they did do a little bit of studio wizardry to age it down even further, to where if I didn't know better, if I had heard this one first, I would have sworn this is an unreleased track from, like, say, the 70s or something, because it sounds that convincing. And it blows my damn mind, but I love this one so freaking much. And then that brings us to the final track on the album, and that is Deep Deep Feeling, the 3D RDN remix, and this one's an interesting one to me, because I feel like we have very subtle nods to McCartney 1 and 2 in this one, and I would have to go back and re-listen to it on the original McCartney 3 album to see, were those there in the original? Because I don't think they were, but the subtle gasps in the intro kind of feel like a throwback to Crean Crore, the final track on the original McCartney album, and then shortly thereafter we get that electronic beat from Temporary Secretary, which was on McCartney 2, so it's kind of like bringing it around full circle for McCartney 3. I don't know, I think that's really cool. I think that's really cool if that is in fact intentional in what they did. Could just be me reading too much into it because I noticed the temporary secretary thing first, and then noticed the breathing thing on another lesson, was like, wait a minute, I know what that sounds like. I think I see what they did there. That's kind of cool. These are subtleties that, like, the casual McCartney fan probably wouldn't even notice. It would just, like, go over their head. I noticed them. So, the song admittedly does drag out for a whopping 11 minutes, though. Technically, it's 2 tracks. There's Deep Deep Feeling and Long-Tailed Winterbird, but they flow, one flows into the other. So altogether, it's 11 minutes. I'd have to, like, go through and really try to figure out where does one stop and when does one start. Because on the vinyl, just looking at it, I can't see, like, a division line to try to tell where's this one and this one. And on Spotify, it's all just one track. So I'm like, oh, well, that didn't help me figure it out any. So, I mean, even half of that, I think, would have sufficed. I think a lot of the repetitiveness could have been, you know, tightened up a little bit. But it's still an interesting track to pull together, the McCartney 3 trilogy. Or just the McCartney trilogy, I suppose, not McCartney 3 trilogy, but it's still cool. It's still cool. I don't dislike it. I think they could have tightened it up a little bit. But, ultimately, like I said, I like this a lot more than I thought I was going to. I think for me, I'm gonna rate it a very solid 8 out of 10. Very solid. Like, I'm shook. If you had asked me before I heard what it was, just on the assumption of what I thought it was gonna be, what I assumed my rating would look like, definitely would have undershot that quite a bit. But now that I have it in my hands, and now that I've heard it, and see what it actually is, which I feel like could have been made a little clearer in the lead up to its release, I love it! And, like, if you guys haven't checked this one out yet, I really think you should. I think you're missing out on something really special that otherwise could easily be overlooked, because, like I said, I very nearly overlooked it myself, and I'm so glad that I didn't, because this is a gem. This is definitely a gem. So, anyway, guys, that is it for this one. So, as usual, you know what to do. If you like this video, go ahead and give it a like. If you're not already and you'd like to be, click subscribe. Hit that notification bell icon so you never miss an upload. Leave comments down below. Make sure you're following my social media accounts, my Facebook fan page, my Twitter, my Instagram, my Etsy, everything and more. It's all down below. And if you like what I do here on this channel and you'd like to help support it, the donation link, as always, is down in the description. Anyway, guys, till next time, bye!